Remember flipping through history books in school and seeing those mysterious abbreviations AD, BC, BCE, and CE next to all the dates. They were like the secret codes, right? We might have scratched our heads trying to figure them out, but they often slipped our minds as time passed. Nowadays, though they are everywhere, popping up whenever we explore our history or culture, even other fields also. But what's the deal with them? What do they mean? What are the correlation among these terms and why do they matter? Let's decode their meaning, importance, understand how to calculate them and explore tracking trends over long periods like centuries. Generally, as we all know, that BC stands for before Christ, and for AD, we usually say after death. It's not. Yes, you are mistaken here for AD. AD refers to Anno Domini. It is a Latin word. The phrase means in the year of our Lord. Another interesting fact is that BC and BCE denote the same era, as do AD and CE.
So BC stands for before Christ, that is before the birth of Jesus Christ. And another one is AD. AD stands for Anno Domini. It's a Latin term. It translates to in the years of Jesus Christ. And the another one is BCE and CE. So BCE stands for before Common Era and CE stands for Common Era. That both concepts are equivalent to each other. Like BCE and BC both are equivalent.
To give you an idea about the AD, it is the era we currently live in. You can say the current year is 2024 AD or 2024 CE. Both have the same meaning. So back to AD BC. The story revolves around the AD or Anno Domini. The AD BC dating system was first introduced by the Christian monk named Dionysius Exiguus in the 6th century, around 525 AD, which is 1499 years from the present year 2024. Yeah, we'll get into these calculations and terms soon, but first we have to understand the history of the dating system. Dionysius came to Rome around 496 AD, which is 1528 years from today, summoned by Pope Saint Gelasius to organize church archives.
Saint Dionysius, I summon you to organize church archives.
Of course, Pope, it would be my pleasure. He also translated many works from Greek to Latin and also wrote a treatise on elementary mathematics. In 525 AD, Pope St. John recognized Dionysius' talents. Dionysius, I want to assign you a great duty.
Yes, please, Pope St. John.
You have to create a new chronology for the world.
Yes, I am honored.
Dionysius wanted to unite all Christians by setting up a single Easter date that both Eastern and Western churches could agree on, since they celebrated it on different days. Easter is a Christian holiday that celebrates the rebirth of Jesus Christ. However, keeping track of time was really tricky because there had been 1,000 pairs of consuls, Rome's top leaders, before Dionysius. Consuls were like the chief executives of Rome, serving together each year. To create a Christian chronology, Dionysius introduced the BC AD dating system. Before this, people relied on systems tied to pagan beliefs, like counting years since Rome foundation or based on consuls. Dionysius calculated that the year in which he worked was the 533 since the birth of Christ, so he called it AD 533. From there on, he used AD, Anno Domini, meaning in the year of the Lord, and BC for before Christ, indicating years before his birth. But here is the interesting fact. Dionysius never claimed the birth of Jesus Christ. He only mentioned the era of Christ. Bede, an English monk, was one of the first to use BC AD to date events, such as AD 704 in his work. Bede's book played an important role in publicizing the BC AD dating system, later adopted by other writers for dating historical events. As we discuss BC AD, which is also known as BCE CE, BC before Christ and BCE before Common Era are the same. AD, Anno Domini and CE Common Era are the same. So, how did the traditional BC AD dating system transition into BCE CE which we use today?
So, what was the use of bringing this all new concept in the academic field? So, BC means before Christ. It's more like a religious connotation. Like we are taking the reference of the birth of Jesus Christ. But academic scholars came up with this new idea that why to use this religious connotation when we can use more secular term. In academic terms, before Common Era sounds more suitable. Both are telling us the same things. But the basic difference is key BCE is more academically appropriate term and BC is it's indicating religious connotations.
The use of BCE CE dating system instead of BC AD dating system isn't a new concept. It's been around here for a while. In fact, the use of Common Era CE instead of AD first showed up in German in the 17th century and in English in the 18th century. The switch to BCE CE is about being accurate when talking about history and including everyone regardless of their beliefs. So one of the most important and interesting question arises here. How to calculate these dates? So similar to the number lines in mathematics, the dating system also functions as a timeline. Here is the timeline which is proposed by Dionysius. The one has divided the timeline into two sides, the left side and the right side. The right is for AD CE and the left side is for BC BCE. Let's take three scenarios for these dates to get clear idea. Let's focus on the AD CE side, which is the era we currently live in. What if something started and ended in AD CE only? Take an example of the Delhi Sultanate. The Delhi Sultanate was an Islamic empire that ruled over South Asia from 1206 AD to 1526 AD. Let's first calculate for how many years this empire ruled. For this, we simply minus the bigger date with the smaller one. That is 1526 minus 1206 gives you 320 years. We say the Delhi Sultanate ruled for 320 years. Case 2. How many years ago it started from the current year? Current year is 2024 AD. Subtract 1206, the starting date of the empire, with 2024, the current year. That gives you 818 years. We would say that empire started 818 years ago. And the last case of scenario 1 is, how many years ago the empire ended? Here for this, we subtract the ending date of the empire, which is 1526 AD, with the current year 2024. That gives you 498 years. Now we focus on the left side of the timeline, BC BCE. Let's take an example of the Mauryan dynasty. If you don't know about the Mauryan dynasty, do check the video on the channel and you will get to know many interesting facts about the Mauryan Empire. Link is in the description below. In the timeline, the Mauryan Empire was founded by Chandragupta Maurya in 322 BCE and it ended at 185 BCE. Case 1. Let's first calculate for how many years this empire ruled. What we do is minus the bigger date with the smaller date. 322 minus 185, that is 137 years. So we would say Mauryan Empire ruled for 137 years. Before case 2, there is something I want to ask. Did you notice something in the timeline? Yes, it doesn't have 0. In the AD BC timeline, there is no year 0. Dionysius, who created the system in the 6th century, labeled the year after Jesus' birth as year 1, Anno Domini 1. So there is a direct jump from 1 BC to 1 AD without missing a year in between. This means there isn't a straightforward answers on how many years are there between 1 BC and 1 AD because there's no gap or it's not a missing time period. It's just a system's unique way of marking time. Case 2. If you want to calculate how many years ago the Mauryan Empire started from the current year, first we add the BCE date to the current year, which is 322 BCE plus 2024 AD, that gives us 2346. Then subtract 1. It will give you 2345. We can say 2345 years ago, the Mauryan Empire started from the current year. Let's take another scenario. Like we have said that Mauryan Empire ended in 185 BCE. So how many years ago the Mauryan Empire ended? Again we follow the same steps. Add BCE with current year and subtract 1. 185 plus 2024 minus 1. That will give us 2208. We would say Mauryan Empire ended 2208 years ago. So you would be thinking, why do you need to subtract 1 from the years while calculating? The answer is, when calculating years ago from a BC date, we subtract 1 because of the missing year 0. For a better understanding, I'll give you two methods. It's up to you which method you prefer. Method 1. For example, let's calculate the difference between 10 BC and 10 AD. 10 BC to 1 BC is a span of 9 years. 1 AD to 10 AD is a span of 9 years. And we usually take 1 BC to 1 AD span of 1 year. So when you add all of them together, you get 9 from 10 BC to 1 BC plus 1 from 1 BC to 1 AD plus 9 from 1 AD to 10 AD, which gives us 19 years. We can say 10 BCE happened 19 years before 10 CE. When you are calculating the difference between 1 BC and 1 AD, just think of it like this. 1 BC comes right before 1 AD. So when you're counting from 1 BC to 1 AD, you're basically counting just 1 year because you are moving directly from the last year BC to the first year AD. So the difference between 1 BC and 1 AD is simply 1 year. You don't need to worry about subtracting or adding anything else. In this case, it's just one straightforward year. Method 2. Case 1. Imagine you want to find how many years ago 400 BC was. If we had a year 0, adding 400 BC and the current year, example 2024, would give you the right answer. We could have said 400 BC happened 2424 years ago. But that's not the case. Now move to case 2. Due to that missing year 0, directly adding 400 BC and 2024 would count the missing year twice. To avoid this double counting, we subtract 1 after adding the BC year and the current year. This adjusts for the missing year and gives you the accurate answer. 400 BC plus 2024 minus 1, which gives us 2423 years. Now, we would say 400 BC happened 2423 years ago. Scenario 3. The one more question arises here. What if something started in BC BCE and ended in AD CE? Let's take an example of the Roman Empire in the West. The Roman Empire was a major world power during its time. Case 1. How many years ago the Roman Empire had started? As we know, add the beginning date with the current year and subtract 1 from the total, which gives us 2050 years. 2050 years ago, the Roman Empire started. Case 2. How many years ago the empire ended? Here we subtract the ending date with the current year. That is 476 minus 2024. That gives you 1548 years. We can say 1548 years ago the Roman Empire ended. Case 3. How long did the Roman Empire rule? Add beginning and the end date and subtract 1. 27 plus 476 minus 1. That gives you 502, which means the Roman Empire ruled for 502 years in the West. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of these years. Years keep on changing and sometimes it gets difficult to calculate all these years. So generally, historians use centuries instead of exact years because it helps them to see the big picture. A century is simply a period of 100 years.
हर 10 साल का एक decade होता है. Then each 100 year will make a century. And each 1000 year will make a million year. We will only talk about the century.
When we talk about the centuries, the first question strikes in our mind is about the 21st century. You must be thinking that we are in the 2000 era, but how can we be in the 21st century? Let's find out. Calculating the century is simple. 1 to 100 is the first century. 101 to 200 is the second century, and so on. (1901 to 2000 is the 20th century, and when we talk about the 21st century, we are referring to the years from 2001 to 2100. AD-CE timeline works forwards and BC or BCE timeline works backwards. But here in all the centuries, the 100th year is missing. When we count 180 to 100 AD, there are only 99 years. 101 AD to 200 AD, there are 99 years again, and so on. Same happens in the BC-BCE timeline also. We can count 99 years in 1 BC to 100 BC and so on. Here's the mystery of the missing year. For this confusion, you can blame the sneaky missing year 0 between BC and AD. Picture history like a giant train ride and years as passengers. Each car represents a century, holding 100 passengers as years. The train labeled AD, Anno Domini, meaning in the year of the Lord, starts with the first century car carrying passengers 1, year 1, to 100, year 100. On the other side of the tracks runs the BC, before Christ train, mirroring this system but counting backwards. This analogy helps visualize the flow of time, with each century a distinct section on this grand historical railway. It's just a calendar quirk. The important part, both 99 and 100 years can be right depending upon how you count. Plus, historical records can be fuzzy. So, centuries acknowledge that uncertainty. They also are easier to remember and discuss. But remember, exact years still matter for specific events. I hope your doubts are cleared. See you soon.